A name for Cedric. Cedric, King Chatterlot exclaimed, looking up from the letter he was reading. What do you think? About what, your Majesty? Enquired Cedric, the king's valet. My cousin, King Comfortable Enough, has invited me and one of my knights to go and stay with him for 2 weeks. Isn't that splendid? Very nice, your Majesty, replied Cedric, except for one thing. And what, may I ask, is that? Enquired the king rather impatiently. You haven't got a knight, Cedric answered. We have never needed one. Nobody has ever tried to attack us, and all the local dragons are friendly. I know that, said the king, but I have to impress my cousin, and that is why I've decided to make you my knight. Cedric gulped. It had been bad enough when King Comfortable Enough had visited them and Cedric had been made court bugler, especially as Cedric couldn't play the bugle. But this was something quite different. Can't, your Majesty, Cedric stuttered. Give me one good reason why not, replied King Chatterlot. Well, for one thing, I haven't a suit of armour. All knights wear armour. I have already thought of that, said King Chatterlot. You can wear the suit of armour that stands in the main hall. It belonged to my grandfather, though why he had it I shall never know. Nobody ever attacked us then either. Cedric tried to think of another excuse. I haven't a proper name, your Majesty. All knights have fine names like Sir Ferdinand Faultless. Who ever heard of a knight called just plain Cedric? King Chatterlot hadn't thought of that, but he had no intention of being beaten. I have the matter in hand, Cedric. You just run along and try on the armour, there's a good fellow. Cedric grumbled to himself all the way to the main hall. He was so cross that he gave the suit of armour a hefty kick, and before he knew what was happening, the helmet fell off and hit him on the head. Cedric was so surprised that he fell over. That's all I needed, he grumbled, picking himself up again. A silly suit of armour tried to attack me, and what's more, I don't know how to put it on. If I take it to bits and put it on a piece at a time, I won't be able to do it up, so that's no good. Cedric thought for a long time. Then he had an idea. He laid the armour on the floor and crawled in feet first through the neck. That was no great problem, as King Chatterlot's grandfather had been much fatter than Cedric, and there was plenty of room to spare. At last he was inside, flat on his back on the floor, gazing up at the ceiling. This was something he hadn't allowed for. He couldn't get up. The armour was far too heavy. He rolled on his side, twisted and turned this way and that, but he just couldn't stand up. There was only one thing for him. He would have to get out and think of something else. Cedric stood the armour up and went off in search of a ladder, which he quickly found and set up. Then he climbed to the top step and carefully lowered himself down inside the suit of armour. I've made it, he cried, picking up the helmet from the table and putting it on. Unfortunately for Cedric, 1 or 2 cobwebs had gathered in the helmet and they tickled his nose, so much so that he began to sneeze such a mighty sneeze that the visor clonked down over his face and refused, no matter how hard he pushed, to go back up again. It must have dented when it fell on me, he wailed. Now I shall have to King Chatterlot to help me get it off. It took Cedric a long time to climb the stairs to King Chatterlot's throne room, for not only was his armour heavy, it was also rather rusty, and every time he moved it squeaked and clanked in the most alarming way. King Chatterlot stared in amazement as a squeaking, clanking Cedric struggled through the door. "Achoo! I'm stuck, your Majesty," Cedric sneezed. "I can see that," said the king, pulling the heavy helmet from his valet's head to reveal a rather red-in-the-face sneezing Cedric. "But how did you manage to get stuck?" "Cobwebs," said Cedric. "Cobwebs," replied the king. "Yes," said Cedric. "Achoo! The helmet's full of them, and they made me sneeze a bit, and my visor came down and got stuck." "That's wonderful," shouted the king. "That's what I've been looking for." Cedric stared in amazement. "Why have you been looking for cobwebs, your Majesty?" "No, no," said the king. "You have found the perfect name." "I have," replied Cedric, rather hoping he wasn't going to be called Sir Cedric Cobweb. "And what might that be?" "Sir Cedric Sneeze a Bit," the king laughed. "The only thing is, we won't be going to stay with my cousin after all. He's caught the measles." Cedric was so glad he wouldn't have to be king's knight that he laughed with joy till the tears rolled down his face. Then he went happily back to the task of being just plain Cedric, King's valet.